How did y'all navigate that rough space?
Well, I'll tell you what happened. I got to the end of my rope because I was thinking, I'm in seminary studying to be a pastor, and I'm thinking there's absolutely no way I can ever stand in front of people and preach hope when I don't even have hope. And I said to God, I don't know what else to do. I've done everything I know to do. It's not working. As soon as I said that, there came to my mind a visual image of Jesus on his knees washing the feet of his disciples. And I heard God say to me, that's the problem in your marriage. You do not have the attitude of Christ toward your wife. It hit me like a ton of bricks.
Oh, God, it just hit me.
And I started crying. And I said, God, forgive me. With all of my study in theology, I've missed the whole thing. Because I remember what Jesus said. When he finished washing their feet, he stood up and said, you call me Master and Lord, and you are right. But in my kingdom, the leader serves.
That part.
You know? And I knew that was not my attitude. You know, my attitude had been something like, I know how to have a good marriage. If you listen to me, we'll have one.
Yes.
She wouldn't listen to me, and I blamed her. That day, I got a different message. And I said, forgive me, Lord, and please give me the attitude of Christ toward my wife.
Dear Future Wifey.
Okay, scripturally, the Bible says your Father has already designed and purposed you.
I experienced an invitation of God this morning.
So you got to become an elite decision maker.
Elite decision maker.
He said, because you are one fleshly decision away from losing it all.
Etched in my mind is what true submission to Christ looks like.
I gotta maintain that secret connection I have with God.
I'm so full and don't want to belabor this letter.
And I understand how important it is for men to disciple men, because if I didn't have that, I wouldn't be where I am today.
I've traded worldly pleasures to live a God-centered life.
The encounter I just had, I just need to rest in it.
Help us to be considerate, creative, and courageous lovers.
I love you. Your future hubby. Welcome to the Dear Future Wifey Podcast. I'm your host, Laterras R. Whitfield. Listen, are you still shacking up with us? If you're still shacking up with us, can we get a commitment? Hit that subscription button and subscribe. Make sure you turn on your notification bell so you'll be notified about upcoming episodes. Listen, Lit Fam, we are in season 9. This is the launch of season 9, the premiere episode of this season, and we got a heavy hitter on the podcast today. I want to just tell y'all this real quick. If you want to hear about or see behind the scene footage of the Dear Future Wifey Podcast, conversations that we have with our guests, make sure you join our Patreon. Go to patreon.com/Laterras R. Whitfield. You'll get an inside look on what happens in my life when I travel, different behind the scene conversations that I have. And we had an exciting conversation coming from the airport with my homie, Dr. Gary Chapman. And so make sure you sign up for Patreon for that. Well, without further ado, this is a person I've been wanting to have on the podcast since the podcast inception. And I said, God, if you build this podcast big enough, then when I do ask this king in the kingdom to come on the podcast, that I hope to get a yes. And God favored me for such a time as this. And so without further ado, welcome to the Dear Future Wifey Podcast, my homie, Dr. Gary Chapman.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
You've never been introduced as somebody homie on the podcast before, have you?
I have not.
My homie, Dr. Gary Chapman. Listen, man, I'm so honored to have you on the Dear Future Wifey Podcast. What made you say yes?
I don't know. I just, the gal from Moody Publishers, who's kind of sets things up for me like this, she said, I think this would be a good place for you to go. I just go on her judgment.
Good.
So I'm hoping she's right.
Yeah, she's right, Janice. Shout out to Janice for the recommendation. I appreciate you so much. Listen, a lot of people have heard the 5 love languages, but they're not familiar with your face. They're not even familiar with your name attached to it. I'll talk to people and I'll ask them, or they'll even say, what's your love language? And And it's interesting because they don't even know where that came from.
Yeah.
And then I'll ask them, do you know who the creator of that is? And they're like, no. So Dr. Gary Chapman. They was like, oh, I don't know who that is. Matter of fact, we were eating breakfast a minute ago. I asked the waitress after you went to the restroom, I said, have you heard of the 5 love language? She said, oh, certainly. I said, that's the guy that created it. She was like, it is? How do you feel about that?
Well, I'm just glad that people get the message. Whether they know me or not is not important. Knowing me ain't going to help them. But knowing the message of the 5 love languages is going to greatly enhance all of their relationships.
Why do you feel that way?
Because I've seen it happen throughout the years. It really grew out of my counseling over and over and over. I'll never forget the day many years ago when I first encountered in my office the reality that what makes one person feel loved doesn't make another person feel loved. Couple came in. I'd never met them. Found out later they'd been married to each other for 30 years. They sat down and the wife started talking immediately, and she said, before we start, let me just tell you a little bit about us. She said, we don't argue. We don't believe in arguing. We don't have any money problems. And she went on with 2 or 3 more positive things, and I was beginning to wonder, did they come in to tell me what a good marriage they have? Then she started crying. And she said, the problem is, I just don't feel any love coming from him. She said, we're cordial, but we're like roommates living in the same house. He does his thing, I do my thing. There's nothing going on between us. And I feel so empty inside. I looked over at her husband, and he said, I don't understand her. I do everything I can to show her that I love her. And she sits there and tells you what she's been telling me. She doesn't feel loved. He said, I don't know what else I can do. I said, well, what do you do to show your love to her? He said, well, I get home from work before she does. I start the evening meal. Sometimes I have it ready when she gets home. If not, she'll help me, and then we eat, and after we eat, I wash the dishes every night. He said, on Thursdays, I vacuum the floor. On Saturday, I wash the car, I mow the grass, I help her with the laundry, and he went on. I was beginning to wonder, what does this woman do? It sounded to me like he was doing everything.
Yeah.
And he said, and yet she sits there and says she doesn't feel loved. He said, I honestly don't know what else I could do. I looked back at her, and she was crying. She said, he's right. He's a hard-working man. But we don't ever talk. We haven't talked in 20 years.
Wow.
He's always washing the dishes, mowing the grass, vacuuming. And I realized here was a sincere husband who was doing everything he knew to do to show his wife that he loved her, and a wife who didn't get it. And after that, I heard similar stories over and over in my office. And I knew there had to be a pattern to it, but I had no idea what it was. So eventually I took time to sit down and read several years of notes that I made when I was counseling and asked myself the question, when someone said, I feel like my spouse doesn't love me, what did they want? What were they complaining about? And their answers fell into 5 categories. And I later called them the 5 love languages. And I started using that in my counseling. If you want her to feel love, you've got to learn how to speak love in her language.
Yeah.
If you want him to feel love, you've got to learn his love language. And I would help couples discover each other's love language, challenge them to go home and try it. And sometimes they would come back in 3 weeks and say, Gary, this is changing everything. I mean, the whole climate's different now. And then I started using it with small groups, just teaching the concept. And the same thing would happen. I guess it was 5 years later when I thought, if I could put this concept in a book and write it in the language of the common person, leave out psychological terms that people wouldn't understand, maybe I could help a lot of couples I would never have time to see in my office.
That's good.
Of course, little did I know that, as you know, the book is sold now over 20 million copies. It's been published in over 50 languages around the world, which absolutely blows my mind.
20 million copies.
I can't even count that many.
20 millions. Listen, Dr. Chapman, 20 million. And you said it's been translated in over 50 languages?
Yeah.
To think that, we talked about this, driving up here, and I said, how does it feel to be someone who has impacted culture on this level? What would you say to that?
Greatly humbled. I cannot imagine. People have asked me, how do I explain that?
Yeah.
Because, the book's been out now for 30 years, and it keeps on selling more every year than it did the year before. That doesn't happen.
I was about to say, which is unheard of.
Yeah, it doesn't happen. And I said, when people ask me, I say, well, for me, the short answer is God.
Yes.
And the long answer is God. I could not have made that happen if I wanted to make it happen. But I think what's happened on the human level is people read it, the lights come on, they realize how they've missed each other, and then they take the quiz, and then they start learning each other's language and speaking it. And what I call the love tank begins to fill up.
Yeah.
And then they want their brother and his wife to read it, and their sister and her husband. So it's basically gone word of mouth all over the world.
Like the Bible.
Like the Bible, yeah.
Yeah.
And I tell you what really surprised me, that he went to other languages.
That's what I was about to ask you, because when you have a concept and ideology that you may say that is just American, and then you find out that other languages, because cultures, they see love totally different. Yeah. But to realize that this is a common thread between human beings, no matter what ethnicity, no matter what denomination of faith, no matter what cultural upbringing, or even religion, that they all identify with that. That is a God thing.
Yeah, my academic background before I studied counseling and theology was cultural anthropology.
Really?
I did an undergrad and a master's degree, studying cultures all over the world and how they're organized, how they function. So when the first publisher came, which happened to be Spanish, they came to my publisher to get the rights. And I said to my publisher, I don't know if this works in Spanish.
Yeah.
Because I'm so sensitive to cultural differences. And they said, well, they've read the book and they want to publish it. I said, well, okay. It became their bestseller. And then it just started from one and it just kept going. And for many of the publishers, it's been their bestseller.
So what did they change? Did they change any type of concept?
Well, people ask me, oh, how do you know that they translated exactly like you wrote it? I said, I don't. I can't read that language.
But you say it's working.
But I said, I'm assuming that when they explain the languages, they explain the dialects of that language in their language. For example, there are cultures where if two men who are friends meet each other on the street, they kiss you on the cheek and kiss you on the other cheek.
Right.
Physical touch.
Right.
We don't do that in our culture, but it is in their culture a natural way of expressing your love, So I'm assuming they make those cultural differences, but it does say to me what you said basically, that as humans, there's a fundamental need, emotional need to feel loved by the significant people in your life. And that these 5 languages seem to be pretty basic to human culture. And so there are cultural differences in the way you express them, but the languages themselves seem to be pretty fundamental.
And what I find also impressive is that God used you to be a change agent to shift the way we see love. That is not to be taken lightly. When God puts his hand on an individual, and I'm very sensitive to that. That's the reason why I wanted you on the podcast, because first of all, it's an honor to have someone that you can actually talk to that has shifted culture, that shifted the way we see love, that began to be not only just a catchphrase where it's like, what's your 5, what's one of your love languages, but it's literally an ideal of thought of how people decide to date. And when you see that, I've watched little dating shows where people would be like, so what's your love language? And it's funny too, when I was watching this one show and they just got all wrong. It's like, well, I like walks on the beach. You know what I'm saying? It's like, that's not one of the languages, but you may say quality time. Yeah. But what does that really mean to you? But the know that you, sir, has God's hand over your life. And that book was written how many years ago? For
32 years now.
32 years ago. Yeah. And a matter of fact, you just celebrated an anniversary, your 63rd anniversary yesterday, right?
Wedding anniversary.
Yes.
Same woman. 63 years.
63 years. Amazing. And I asked you, I said, did your relationship married to this woman impact the way you began to write and share these concepts? When you look at the 5 love languages, I know you looked at all the many years and people that you counseled, but when you looked at your own marriage, how did that begin to impact that?
Well, let me go back and say this. My wife and I had lots of struggles in the early years of our marriage. We were in love and we were going to be happy forever. But it wasn't very long, and I didn't know that the in love thing wouldn't last. I was always told, if you got the real thing, it's going to last forever.
Yep, lies.
Well, I came down off that high, and then we had differences.
What year was that you came off of it?
Oh, well, we dated 2 years before we got married.
Oh, really? You waited that long?
And I came down pretty soon after the honeymoon. Because the average lifespan of the in love euphoria is 2 years.
You said so once you got married.
Yep.
He was coming down.
And then I came down, and then we ended up arguing because I knew I was right. She knew she was right. I tried to convince her. She tried to convince me. I remember one night, it was pouring down rain outside, and we were in an argument. And in the middle of the argument, my wife walked out the front door into the rain. And I thought, this is bad. When a woman walks in the rain, it's bad. So, yeah, we had lots and lots of struggles. And I remember having the feeling, I think I married the wrong person.
Yep. What did you do in that moment when she walked in the rain? Did you go get her?
No, I just let her walk, and eventually she came back soaked. I didn't want to follow her and be arguing in the rain. If she wants to get wet, that's her thing. But, looking back on it.
Well, let me ask you this, Dr. Chapman. What was the argument about? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
That's what I'm saying. Isn't that crazy?
Oh, yeah.
You can remember how you felt. You can remember her walking in the rain. You can remember everything else. Yeah. But if I say, what was the argument about? Remember.
No, I don't remember. Don't remember that, But now, before I came down off the high, and I didn't know anything about love languages.
Of course.
But I gave her words of affirmation. I told her, I said, honey, I love you. I'm so glad I married you. I really appreciate what you did. I just gave her words of affirmation. And I probably told her a dozen times a day in those early days, I love you, honey. I'm so glad I married you. I love you, love you, love you. And one night she said to me, you keep on saying I love you. If you love me, why don't you help me?
Ooh.
I said, what do you mean? She said, well, you don't ever offer to wash the dishes or vacuum the floors or clean the toilet. I mean, you don't offer to do anything. Now, I was in graduate school. 2 weeks after we got married, I enrolled in seminary to study to be a pastor. But she said, if you love me, you would help me. And when I heard her rattle off those things, I didn't say this, but what I thought was, what are you talking about? My mother did those things. But looking back on that, she was telling me her love language.
Yes, she was.
It was acts of service.
Yep.
I was giving her words of affirmation. In my mind, I was expressing love to her, but it wasn't coming across to her. If you love me, do something. At
that time, did you feel loved by her?
Yeah, at that time. But later on, when we got into the arguments and all of that, I lost the positive feelings. And I didn't feel loved by her. I thought if she loved me, she'd do what I said. And then I had negative feelings toward her.
Yeah.
And as I said, I started thinking,
Married the wrong
I've just
person.
married the wrong person. This is not going to work. In fact, I kind of got upset with God because I said, before I got married, I told you, don't let me marry her if she's not the right one.
Mm-hmm.
And you let me do it. And here I am, miserable, you know?
And that was year what, 2?
Oh, yeah, I was in the second year. Yeah.
The second year, second year of knowing her, facing much.
Yeah.
So this the first year of marriage your first year of marriage was extremely rocky. Then it started off bad.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the first few weeks or months, couple of months maybe, it was fine, but then it went downhill.
And were y'all in counseling? Did y'all ever do premarital counseling?
Oh no, I didn't even know that there's such a thing as a counselor.
Yeah.
And we never read a book on marriage.
No, most people don't.
I don't know if there was a book on marriage.
Probably wasn't.
And we had 1 hour with the pastor.
The book of marriage was the Bible. That's all they gave us back then.
Yeah. We had 1 hour with the pastor who married us. And that was mostly about the wedding. So we didn't think we needed any help. You know, when you're in love, you don't need any help.
We love each other. We're going to get married and have kids and be great.
But, you know, looking back on that, if we had not gone through that and I had not felt the deep pain of being married but feeling unloved and feeling like it's not working, I would not have had empathy for people who sit in my office and say, we have no hope.
There it is.
Because I feel empathy for them. It brings back those memories to me. And, you know, when I sometimes say with people I'm counseling who share that with me, I say, you know, I can understand that. I can see how you get to that place because I remember I was there one time. So what about this? Would you be willing to go on my hope for you? Because I have hope for you. Over the years, I've counseled a lot of people who feel exactly like you feel.
Yeah.
And they're different now. So if you're willing to go on my hope, I'll be willing to meet with you and we'll try some things and we'll see what can happen.
Good.
And if they are, and most of the time they are, then things can happen, you know, and it's just exciting. I tell you, one of the most exciting experiences I've ever had, a man was in hospice. I went to see him. And when I walked in, his wife was there, and he said, Dr. Chapman, thank you for coming because we're sitting here planning my funeral, and you can help us. And so I took notes, you know, and we talked. And when we got through, I said, well, let me pray for you. And I held his hand, and she got on the other side of the bed and held his hand. And I reached across the bed and held her hand, and I prayed for both of them. And when I got through, I released his hand, I released her hand, but he held onto her hand. And he brought it to his face, and he kissed her hand. And when he did, I started crying. Because I remembered 30 years ago when they sat in my office and said, we have no hope. And here they are, 30 years later, at the end of the journey, loving each other. And I remember when they walked out of my office after 9 months of counseling, they walked out and said, Dr. Chapman, we never believed it, but we love each other again. And then to see them 30 years later, I mean, that's the reward of counseling.
Now, Dr. Chapman, you ain't about to have me cry right now. Oh, my God. 30 years later. Oh, my God. When you look back at that, how did y'all navigate? Because, like, you know, they didn't have counseling back then. Yeah. So how did you... well, they had it, but it was so taboo. It was like you have to be mentally insane if you were going to a counselor or something. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with your marriage? You have to go through counseling. Now it's been normalized. But when you look back at that 2 years ago, how did y'all navigate that rough space?
Well, I'll tell you what happened. I got to the end of my rope because I was thinking, I'm in seminary studying to be a pastor. And I'm thinking, there's absolutely no way I can ever stand in front of people and preach hope when I don't even have hope. And I said to God, I don't know what else to do. I've done everything I know to do. It's not working. As soon as I said that, there came to my mind a visual image of Jesus on his knees washing the feet of his disciples. And I heard God say to me, that's the problem in your marriage. You do not have the attitude of Christ toward your wife. It hit me like a ton of bricks.
Oh, God, it just hit me.
And I started crying. And I said, God, forgive me. With all of my study in theology, I've missed the whole thing. Because I remember what Jesus said. When he finished washing their feet, he stood up and said, you call me Master and Lord, and you are right. But in my kingdom, the leader serves.
That part.
You know? And I knew that was not my attitude. You know, my attitude had been something like, I know how to have a good marriage. If you listen to me, we'll have one.
Yes.
She wouldn't listen to me, and I blamed her. But that day I got a different message. And I said, forgive me, Lord, and please give me the attitude of Christ toward my wife. In retrospect, it's the greatest prayer I ever prayed about my marriage because God changed my heart and gave me a desire to serve her. 3 questions made it practical for me. And looking back on it, these 3 questions were telling me her love language. I didn't know anything about the concept then. Mm-hmm. But I started asking her questions. Question number 1, honey, what could I do to help you? Question number 2, what could I do to make your life easier?
Oh, that's a good one.
Question number 3, how could I be a better husband? And when I was willing to ask those questions, she was willing to give me answers. And I started doing those things. So looking back, I said she was telling me her love language. And I was speaking it now. Our marriage didn't change overnight, but within 3 months, my wife started asking me those 3 questions. What can I do to help you? How can I make your life easier? How can I be a better wife? So we've been walking this road a long time now, in which I've been reaching out to serve her. She's been reaching out to serve me. And what happens is you both become winners. You know, in the early days, we were losers. I shot her, she shot me. We stayed wounded most of the time. Yeah. Then we became winners. And even that's not the end. Once you get it going like that, then each of you can turn and bless the world with that whatever abilities God has given you. You know.
Dr. Chapman, there it was right there.
So I'm just grateful that God changed my attitude.
I wanted her on the podcast to join you, but she doesn't do many interviews, does she?
She does not. Her energy level is not really the best at this point. She's still active and all, but if she gets out for an hour or two, she has to go home and rest an hour or two. You know, so she doesn't do many interviews.
Let the people know, how old are you?
I'm 86.
86 years old.
Married 63 years, and my wife says she doesn't know how that could be possible because she's only 49.
I said she got that Benjamin
She's actually 85.
He got him a younger lady. So when you met her, what made you decide to marry her?
Well, I had known her really all my life.
Really?
We grew up in the same church.
Okay.
But in high school, I dated her best girlfriend. And I was in love with her best girlfriend. But when I went off to college in Chicago, she wrote me a Dear John letter, 6 weeks. And she said, Chicago's too far away. I think we need to go our separate ways. And my heart was broken. And I think it was 2 years later when I was at home for a holiday, I saw Carolyn in church. And I thought, my goodness, how did I miss her? And so we started talking after service, and I found out she was getting ready she wanted to go to college. She'd been working 2 or 3 years to get money to go to college. And so we started a 2-year letter writing relationship because I was in Chicago. She was going to school in Tennessee. And we wrote letters for 2 years and before we got married.
So for the people that's young, you know, they didn't have cell phones back then.
That's true.
They couldn't text. They didn't have Instagram. They didn't have MySpace wasn't even around back then.
That's right.
You had to write letters.
Yeah, and you couldn't use a telephone. They had telephones on the wall, but that cost money. We couldn't afford telephone calls.
When you look back at that on how y'all courted by letters, what do you think is the power behind that?
Well, we were communicating. When you write letters, handwritten letters, you have to think about what you're saying. So, we were communicating with each other and sharing with each other and building our relationship. It was really positive.
Was it any pushback from her knowing that you had dated her best friend?
No, it was very interesting because she said to me real early on after we talked at church that day, I'd asked her if I could take her home that night. Actually, I went back to church that night, asked if I could take her home, and she said, well, we have a ride, because I knew they didn't have a car. And she said, I'm with my mother. And I said, I'll take your mother too, And then she said, well, we have a ride. And I thought, she was so warm this morning, and tonight she's cold. What is the deal? So I gave her time to get home, and I went up to her house and knocked on the door and asked her if I could come in and talk. And so in the conversation, she told me what happened. That afternoon, she had spent time with her best girlfriend. And her best girlfriend told her, leave him alone. I'm in love with him.
After she done broke up with you?
Yeah. And I said to her, well, I haven't talked to her in 3 years. I don't know how she could be in love with me, but I'm not going back to her. She broke my heart one time. I'm not going to do it again. I said, you can make up your own decision as to whether you want to, just try to develop a relationship, but I'm not going back with her. So she agreed to start writing.
What do you think? What do you think? Why do you think her friend did that?
I don't know. I don't know what kind of world she was in.
Because she didn't talk to you, she broke up with you, and then had the audacity to say this. It's one of those things where it's like, I don't want them, but I want you to have them.
Yeah, but now later on, she was actually in our wedding. I mean, everything worked out.
She was what? She was
a bridesmaid in our wedding. Yeah, and my wife had a good relationship with her all the way to the point that she died. Yeah,
man, that's amazing. And then, so I have a different school of thought about that. I agree that if it doesn't work out with one person, I don't care if it's your friend or not. If it did not work out, do not prevent someone else's happiness because it didn't work out for you.
Yeah.
A lot of times people have rules. They be like, well, nah, I don't care if my friend dated you in elementary. I would never give her permission to date you. You know what I'm saying? It's like, what do you think about that? Well,
I think it's short-sighted.
Yeah.
It's short-sighted. Yeah, because you can't compare things 10 years earlier.
Like, just because I saw you first, that it just changes the whole trajectory of my life. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
because if that was the case, this amazing woman that became your bride, you would have to say, no, I can't even date you, let alone marry you, because I dated your friend who didn't want me anymore. Like, like what kind of power is that?
It doesn't make sense logically.
It makes no sense. And so what year did you feel your relationship and your marriage get better? That moment that you had with God where he told you to take a servant's heart and a servant's approach to your wife, around what year was that?
We were probably toward the end of the first year.
And then what did you do? What was the first actionable step you made to show her that your heart had changed?
Well, I started doing those things that I was asking her, what can I do to help you? And again, she went back to washing dishes and vacuuming floors and those things. So I started doing those things,
And what was her response? What did she say?
Then she started telling me how much she appreciated. She started giving me words of affirmation, which is my love language.
Yeah.
And of course, now she says, I'm the greatest husband in the world. And I know that's a hyperbole, but it sounds good to me.
Sounds good to me. I'll take it.
And I still wash dishes and I still vacuum floors,
Really?
Yeah.
So you never got to the point where you started getting, maid service and all that stuff?
Oh, well, I did about 3 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. I said, honey, would it mean just as much to you if I hired someone to come in, every couple of weeks or whatever and do the main vacuuming, the main cleaning and all that? And she said, well, I don't know, maybe, because I was traveling a lot, speaking all. She said, well, maybe we can try it. So we did. Well, now she's the best. She's the lady that cleans the house, one of her best friends. They spend time together before she starts to work, and they have lunch together the day she's working. So it worked. It's still active service, but I'm paying to get it done.
Yeah.
But I still wash the dishes.
You do?
Yeah, because the gal that cleans the house not there but every 2 weeks, The dishes get dirty every night.
This is interesting because, as y'all evolve and I asked you, in 63 years of marriage, does it get easier?
It gets much easier. Once you're speaking each other's love language on a regular basis, and you have either worked through your major conflicts or you're working through them, and you've learned how to respect the other person's ideas, and you're looking for an answer rather than trying to win an argument, marriage becomes much easier as you move down that road. Now, if you don't move down that road and you're not working at speaking each other's language, you're not working at, how to improve things and how to solve conflicts, no, it can get worse.
When you look at after the first year, it getting better, did it, quote unquote, solve all your problems in marriage?
No, we still had conflicts, many conflicts. I don't care who you marry. You're going to have conflicts for one simple reason. We're human.
Yep.
Humans don't think the same way They don't have the same ideas about a lot of stuff. We don't have to agree, but we do have to respect the other person's ideas. And then if we disagree on something, then what we're expressing understanding, and then we're asking, well, how can we solve it? How can we solve the problem? So you work on solving the problem rather than trying to win the argument. If you win the argument, they lost. Yeah. It's no fun to live with a loser. Why would you create one?
You know what? That's good. It's no fun living with the loser, so why would you create one?
Yep.
I've never thought of it like that. That marriage is about both of us winning every single argument where we're supposed to win it together.
Absolutely.
When did that ideology come into play?
Well, pretty early on when we started, I started doing things that whatever she was asking me to do, and she started expressing words of affirmation to me. Then we started treating each other with civility and started listening to each other and started asking, well, okay, so how will we solve that? Let's look for an answer that we can both agree on. And when you're looking for answers, you'll find them.
If you're looking for answers, you'll find them. Was there any points in your marriage where you felt that feeling arise again where I married the wrong person? Year 7, they say the 7-year itch kicks in around year 7 where we start regretting the decisions that we made. Did you experience that?
No. Once we turned the corner and we started moving in the positive direction of loving each other in the right language, I wouldn't have called it that in those days, but that's exactly what we were doing. No, I never had the sense after that I married the wrong person. And looking back on our marriage, I would say I would not be the person I am without her. And she feels the same way. We've helped each other become the persons that each of us felt like God wanted us to be. And we've invested our lives in reaching out to help people with the various abilities that we have. She's a musician. Well, I'm not. I can't sing. Well, I can sing, but usually I don't because I don't want anybody else to hear me. You
want to offend anybody.
Or offend anybody, that's right.
So when you look at that, when you say you feel in the core of your being that the success that you've experienced wouldn't have happened without her by your side.
I really believe that.
Why? Explain that.
I really believe that. Because I think she's encouraged me along the way. I never saw myself as a writer, never even thought about writing a book. But she was an English major, and so she's edited all of my books.
Are you serious?
And the publisher tells me, when we get your manuscripts, they're the cleanest manuscripts we ever get. And I said, there's a reason for that. Her name is Carolyn. She edits all of them. Well, I didn't marry her to be an editor, but it just happened that that's one of the skills she has, and she's used that. And I tell her, I said, now, when you're reading, honey, anything you feel like because we share a lot of our story in all different books. I said, anything you don't feel comfortable with, you just let me know. We'll reword it and work it out or leave it out, But we both agreed pretty much years ago, if we're going to help people, we need to be honest about our own struggles in marriage. And so, we share our failures as well as our successes. And so, I just, it's obvious to me that God brought us together, and God has used both of us to help the other person.
And that's why I gave reference to it. I started calling it one's purpose partner. The person that comes alongside of you, they're more than a wife. They're more than a husband. They're your purpose partner. They come alongside of you to help you fulfill God's purpose in your life. And when you marry the right person, because we always say the right person, I just believe that we treat the person right and cultivate out of them, when the Bible says wash them with the water of the word, that we treat our wives like that, and you'll be able to extract those beautiful gems to help bring purpose into both of y'all's lives. When you look at that, and you said that there was such an interesting thing you shared with me about how the 5 love languages came to be with the publisher, and explain that story about when you partner with Moody, the way they wanted to steer their publishing company and how you came instrumental.
Yeah, well, Moody is a long-term Christian publisher, over 100 years, Moody Publishers in Chicago. But they said to me, we have just decided that we want to publish some books that are not overtly Christian, but they're helpful to people. And Christians will know that you can find this stuff in the Bible, but the non-Christian won't be turned off by reading the first chapter and seeing all these scripture verses and say, well, this is a religious book, and throw it down.
Yeah.
So The 5 Love Languages was one of the first books they published with that philosophy. So you won't find a lot of scripture verses in the 5 love languages. Now, I might say, an ancient Hebrew proverb says, life and death is in the power of the tongue. And I go on and talk about it,
An ancient Hebrew proverb.
An ancient Hebrew proverb. So, in fact, I've had people say, I didn't know you were even a Christian until I got to the end of the book. Because at the end of the book, what I say is, I have given you information on how to effectively love another person by learning their love language. I can't give you motivation. Love is a choice. You make a choice to invest time and energy in trying to meet a need for the other person. I said, I can't give you motivation. In fact, I had a man say to me, my wife and I read your book. We took the quiz. Her language is acts of service. But I'll tell you and her, if it's going to take my washing dishes and my vacuuming floors for her to feel love, she can forget that.
Really?
And I said to him, that's your choice. If you want to live with a wife who has what I call an empty love tank, that's your choice. I said, I much prefer to live with a wife who has a full love tank. So I do wash dishes and vacuum floors. But you see what he was saying?
Yeah.
I'm not going to do anything I don't want to do.
Yep.
He's selfish.
Yep.
Selfishness is the opposite of love.
Yes.
Love is the choice to invest your life and your time and your energy in doing something to help other people.
Yes.
Selfishness, I'm in this for what I can get out of it. So they're business leaders who are selfish.
Yep.
I had a business leader, a guy that had a construction company. He said, I don't care if my men feel appreciated or not. I pay them to get the job done. They get the job done fine. They don't, I fire them. See, he's in there to make money. He doesn't care about the people who work for him.
Yeah.
Well, that's the opposite of love.
Yeah.
Because love wants to enrich the lives of the people that you encounter, whether it's a marriage or any other relationship.
You be dropping gems. It's so amazing when you look at people get to year 63. I've never had the honor of speaking to someone who's been married that long. Like I said, the longest I think is somebody that's like 45 years or whatever. But 63 years. You got married. Wow. Like you were young. I mean, you were 23 years old? I was 23 years old. Yeah. What did you see yourself being? I know you were going through the clergy. You want to be a pastor. Was that the goal?
Yeah, I wanted to be a pastor. And then by the time I finished Moody Bible Institute in Chicago, I really felt God was leading me to the mission field.
Oh, really? You're going to be a missionary?
Yeah. And that's why when I went to Wheaton College, I majored in anthropology, which is a great background for working in other cultures. But what happened eventually is we talked to the mission board, and because my vision was I want to work with nationals and train them to reach their country for Christ. And so the mission board said, well, that would probably be like teaching in a seminary, and it would be helpful if you had the PhD. So I went back to seminary for 3 more years and got the PhD degree. Then we applied officially to the mission board and got turned down.
Wow.
Because of my wife's health. She was having really hard problems at that time physically.
She was going to go with you?
Oh, yeah. She was going to go with me, but they said, we can't send you. We were going to Africa. We were going to Nigeria, Africa, because there's a seminary there. And but she's always had a weak stomach. And they said, we can't send you to the mission field, which greatly frustrated us because we were both ready to go to the mission field.
Yeah.
And so, but now looking back on all of that, and now seeing my books all over the world. I was in Hungary back before the pandemic, and my publisher there has published 35 of my books in Hungarian, and I was just blown away.
35? How many books have you written?
Over 50. Well, you want to do 50 episodes?
50 books.
So anyway, one day I was opening a box of books that had come from another country. And because we always pray for the country and pray God will use the book there, I looked on the couch and my wife was crying. And I said, honey, what's wrong? She said, nothing. I just remember we want to be missionaries. And now your books are all over the world. And I started crying.
Oh, God, that just hit me. Let me tell you, that's why this scripture, one of my favorite scriptures is, for I know all things work together for the good of them that love God and to the called according to his purpose.
Yeah. We didn't understand it when we got turned down, but obviously looking back on it, God's plans were bigger than our plans.
Oh, God, that just hit me. We hear so often his ways are not our ways, his thoughts are not our thoughts. That's the epitome of it, that God can literally take an ideal that you have, an idea, and a good intentioned heart, because you had good intentions to say, I want to spread the gospel and I want to do it by way of being a missionary. And God has allowed your words, your work to be in places your feet haven't even stepped into.
Yep. Absolutely.
We serve a miraculous God. When you look back at that and you look at the 5 love languages, how... And I guess, I got to look at it as a lot of people still may not know. Maybe, hiding under a rock somewhere and don't even know what the 5 love languages are. Can you share the 5 love languages?
Okay, and these are no particular order, but one is words of affirmation. You look nice in that outfit. I really appreciate what you did. Just words. And then there's acts of service. Doing something for the other person. That's what we've been talking about, washing dishes and vacuuming floors.
Why is that we got to start there, Gary? Why I got to be washing dishes?
And then there's receiving gifts. And it's universal. In my studies of cultures around the world, we've never discovered a culture where gift giving is not an expression of love. It's universal.
Yeah.
And they don't have to be expensive gifts. We've always said it's the thought that counts.
Yeah.
Not the thought left in your head, but the gift that came out of the thought in your head, And then there's quality time, giving the person your undivided attention. The lady who said, we talked about earlier, who said, we don't ever talk, she didn't mean they didn't discuss logistics. Who's going to take the kids to school? Which restaurant you want to go to? She didn't mean that.
Yeah.
She meant we don't ever sit down and look at each other and give each other our full attention and talk to each other. So you remember she said, he's always mowing the grass, washing the dishes, always doing something.
Yeah.
No time to look at me. Let's talk about life, quality time. And then physical touch. And we've long known the emotional power of physical touch. Affirming physical touches, because we know there are physically abusive touches as well.
Yeah.
So, and the basic idea of the book is that out of those 5, each of us has what I call a primary love language. One of the 5 will speak to you more deeply than the other 4. Now, we're not going to turn away any one of them.
Yeah.
They're all fine. But if we don't receive love in our primary language, we will not feel loved, even though the person is expressing love in some of the other languages.
Yeah, I've talked to some people, they be like, well, I'm all of them. I can't pick one. I'm all 5. What do you say to those people?
Well, I'll say, first of all, have you taken the quiz? Because the quiz will help you. Okay. But there's 2 kinds of people that have difficulty identifying their love language. One is the person who grew up in a family where they received all 5 languages, and they've always felt loved, and their parents spoke all 5 of them to them, and as adults, they speak all 5.
Yeah.
And with that person, I say, don't worry about it. If you feel loved, that's fine.
And go with it.
The other person is a person who grew up in a home where they never felt loved. And they really don't quite know what it would mean, what it would feel like to feel loved.
Mm.
So, any one of these is fine with them. They're all good, but they don't know if one's more important than another or not, So that's why I sometimes say to couples like that, if they're married and you feel that way, about every 3 weeks, what if you say to each other, honey, on a scale of 0 to 10, how full is your love tank? Or how much love do you feel coming from me? And if they give you a number, anything less than 10, you say, well, this week, what's the most important thing I could do to show you my love? And so at least on that week, you know what's most important for them. And it may not be in the same love language every week, every time you ask that question. Because sometimes there's circumstances they're going through that on this particular week, this is more important than something else, than my primary even.
You talked about some of the, I guess, the healing properties of affirming touch. What is that? I want you to unpack that a little bit when you're talking about physical touch.
Yeah, I think a lot of men will hear
sex,
and that's what they think. I know my love language, physical touch, and what they're talking about is the sexual part of marriage. And I say, well, maybe that is your love language. But let me ask you a question. Do non-sexual touches make you feel loved? And first of all, they look at me like a deer in the headlight. Are there non-sexual touches? I said, okay, let's say the two of you get out of a car, you're walking into a shopping mall, and as you walk through the door, your wife reaches over and holds your hand. Does that make you feel loved? And if he says, that kind of irritates me. I said, okay, let's say she's pouring you a cup of coffee, and she puts her hand on your shoulder as she pours the coffee. Does that make you feel loved? If he says, not really. I said, physical touch is not your language. You like sex. I get the idea. Yeah, that's another whole thing, But so don't assume all men have physical touch. These are not gender specific. A woman can have any one of the five. A man can have any one of the five. But in a marriage, it would be such things as holding hands and, hugs and arm around the shoulder, or driving down the road, you put your hand on their leg, or, kissing. And yes, the sexual part of marriage. So it's affirming touches. And this, as you know, this whole concept applies to children as well. In fact, I have a book called The 5 Love Languages of Children, same 5 languages. And you can really discover a child's love language, their primary language, by the time they're 4 years old, by observing their behavior. How do they relate to you? How do they respond to you? For example, my son's love language is physical touch. When he was that age, when I came home from work, he'd run to the door, grab my leg, and climb on me. Yeah. He's touching me because he wants to be touched. Our daughter never did that. At that stage, she would say, Daddy, come to my room. I want to show you something. She wanted quality time. So it's there very early in a child's life.
You just have to you have to pay attention to it.
That's right. Observe how
by 4 years old.
Yeah, it's there. It's there at least by 4 years old.
I've noticed too, and you can touch on this, that I remember we took the 5 love languages before I got married. And I've been divorced 9 years, and I was married for almost 10 years. At the beginning, we took the 5 love languages, and my love language was physical touch. By the end of my marriage, towards the end, I took it again, and it began to be words of affirmation. Do you find that your love language can change based upon just life circumstances, or even more so who you get married to?
Yeah, I think there's a sense in which the primary love language tends to stay with us, like a lot of other personality traits. But having said that, yes, I think there are seasons of life and circumstances where another love language may jump to the top. For example, a mother who has 2 preschool children, acts of service may not be her primary language, but during those years, it's probably going to jump to the top because she's overwhelmed. Or a circumstance. Let's say your spouse is on the phone and they get off the phone and hang it up and they start crying and they say, I just received word that my brother died. And they're weeping. Physical touch may not be their language, but at that juncture, putting your arms around them and just holding them while they cry is probably the most powerful thing you can do. Yeah. So I think there are circumstances and then stages of life in which the primary love language may change.
That's interesting. It's real interesting because it also gave me a homework assignment to get my son to take. Now, is 16 years old to which one should they take? The child, the one about the child, or the one for the adult, I guess, 5 love languages?
Well, if they go to 5lovelanguages.com, the website, there's a quiz for teenagers.
Okay.
There's one for married couples. There's one for single adults. There's one for teenagers. And then there's some things you can do with little children to figure out their language as well. But yeah, the teenagers. In fact, I have a book written to teenagers. It's called A Teen's Guide to the 5 Love Languages.
That's one of the 50 books?
Yeah, that's one of the, and that one is helping the teenager understand the concept and understand themselves, and also understand that mother has a love language, daddy has a love language, sister has a love language. It opens up a whole new world to them.
What kind of testimonies have you heard from teenagers? Because you have an interesting journey. When you started off in ministry, you felt a strong passion for, college students. And so let's talk about that, because I believe, and this is what I love about your life, is that when you look at your journey and we talk about all things working together for the good of them, that you look back early on in ministry, you were in that, and now fast forward, now you're doing love language for teens. So talk about the impact that you had and how God had you focus on university kids.
Well, I worked at the same church staff for 50 years. And the first 10 years on that staff, I directed our college ministry, because our pastor said, there's 4 major universities or colleges in our city.
Winston-Salem, shout them out.
Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And no church has a ministry to college students. And so I started at Wake Forest University with one small group Bible study. At the end of that semester, I said, now, next semester, I want you and you to find you 8 or 10 people to be in your Bible study, and you lead the Bible study. I'll meet with you 2 guys. I won't lead a Bible study. And I said, we're going to multiply this thing. Next year, you find 2 people in your group. And we got up to 30 Bible studies going on the campus, small groups. And we brought in InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, which is a national organization, and it's still going on at Wake Forest University. And on Sunday morning, I taught a class for college students, and we'd run anywhere from 100 to 150 students every Sunday morning. And one of the things that I would teach for about 10 weeks every year was preparation for marriage. I said, you may not even be dating, but if you ever plan to get married, you ought to learn how marriage works.
That's good.
And so my first book, near the end of that 10 years, grew out of that, because I'd been studying it, and I just wrote a book called Toward a Growing Marriage. We've now changed the title. Now it's The Marriage You've Always Wanted.
That's a better title.
So, and then on Friday nights, every Friday night for 10 years, we had college students at our house, anywhere from 20 to 60. And half of them were sitting on the floor because we didn't have that many chairs. And the whole thing was Q&A for 2 hours, whatever they wanted to ask about anything. I wasn't the answer man, but I led the discussion. And then we'd have refreshments, donut holes every Friday night.
That's what kept bringing them out there, those college students. They said, I can get a meal. And
then they could sit around and talk to each other till 11 o'clock, and then we'd ring a bell. It's time for you guys to go home now.
Till 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah. But that ministry introduced me, again, to college students. I really loved it, because college students are going to go out and have a positive or a negative impact on the world.
Yep.
One or the other. And it's been interesting to see where many of those students, of course, I haven't kept up with everybody, but many of them, and they're all over the country now, many of them in other countries now. So
I don't know what they think when Dr. Gary Chapman became Dr. Gary Chapman. It's like, I used to sit down in this house when I was 19 years old. They're like, yeah, right. It's like, I promise you, I used to sit in this house and ask some questions and all that. It's like, that's amazing. The cool thing about it is, going through marriage, was Carolyn always on board with this stuff? Like, I'm going to bring all these college students to our house. And she was like, oh, sure. She was like, oh my God, what are you doing now, Gary?
Yeah. She was really always on board. In fact, I tell you, one of the biggest things, a young man came to me. He had just finished the University of North Carolina, and he had a job teaching in the public school that year. And he came to me and he said, I grew up in a very dysfunctional family. My father was an alcoholic and da-da-da-da-da. And I have no idea what a healthy family looks like. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, would you and Carolyn be willing for me to move in with you and live with you for a year so I could see what a healthy family looked like? And I said, well, let me talk to Carolyn about that. I talked to Carolyn, and she thought, well, we don't have an extra bedroom. She said, but we had an open basement. She said, we could put a wall down there and put a bed in there, and we could make that work. And then we talked to the kids about it. And the kids,
how many kids you have? Just 2,
boy and a girl. And they thought it would be good to have an older brother, So we let him come and live with us for a year. And he's told me since, of course, he's now in his 60s, I guess. He said, Gary, I hate to think what it would have been like if I hadn't lived with you all for that year, And we integrated him into the family. I mean, he had chores to do like the kids did. He washed dishes sometimes during those years.
Yeah, he gave Carolyn one of her love languages.
Yeah. So I wrote one of my more recent books called 5 Traits of a Healthy Family. What does a healthy family look like? And I wrote it because there are thousands of young men and women who grow up in dysfunctional families, and they have no idea what a healthy family even looks like. And I think that book's going to help a lot of them get a picture of how they can have a healthy family.
What made you be willing to do that?
Just because I felt the pain of so many young people who just, they don't know what a healthy family looks like.
What was your upbringing like? Was it healthy?
Yeah, it was healthy. I grew up my mom and dad were both Christians. They took us to church every Sunday morning, every Sunday night, every Wednesday night. Church was a big part of our lives. And I came to put my faith in Christ, rather early in my life. And at 17, senior in high school, is when I felt God was leading me into some kind of ministry. And the only thing I knew you could do, you could be a pastor or be a missionary. That's all I knew. And at that time, I thought missionaries worked in the jungle, and I thought I probably should be a pastor because I hated snakes. So that's why at Moody Bible Institute, I studied the pastor's course, But at the end of my time there, I felt God leading me to be a missionary because I thought, why should I stay here when the great bulk of the population of the world is somewhere else?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So was that... bringing that young man into your home for that year, was it a year? And that was it?
Yeah.
And then you kicked him out?
Well, he moved on to another job in another state because he was not from the local area.
Was that the muse of the book, What a Healthy Family Looks Like?
Well, I start out with that story just to kind of tell them and to talk about the need. But the book itself really grows out of the biblical approach to marriage and family. And, Ephesians 4 and Ephesians 5 are pretty clear on what a healthy family looks like.
Talk about it. What does it say? Well,
one of them is that there will be intimacy between a husband and wife in a healthy family. The writer of Ephesians, Paul, quoted Genesis. In marriage, the two become one. Doesn't mean we lose our identity, but there's intellectual intimacy and emotional intimacy and social intimacy, physical intimacy, spiritual intimacy, deep intimacy in a healthy marriage. And then in a healthy family, the parents will teach and train the children. And this is really throughout the whole of the Bible. And those two words are very different. Teaching is using words, but training is actions. So, you talk to the child, but you also show them how it's done. You can stand there and tell them how to wash a car. Well, that's fine, but let's get out there and let me show you how it's done. So using words, so teaching and training the children. And the children will obey and honor their parents. And today, that's one of the major problems. Children do not obey their parents.
Why is that?
I think it's because so many parents have a totally non-Christian idea that you just want the child to grow up to be themselves. Whatever they want to do is fine. So they just let them do everything. And they have no respect for authority. In fact, public school teachers tell me the biggest problem in the classroom is keeping discipline so I can teach, because they don't respect authority. So if they don't learn to respect the parents by obeying and honor the parents, they're not going to respect teachers or anybody else.
Exactly.
They're going to do what they want to do. Well, everybody does what's right in his own eyes. It's chaos, chaos. So anyway, those are some of the things in that book.
How do you think we can change that? What are some principles that we can put into place to teach kids to honor authority and become more respectful?
I think one is let them suffer the consequences when they do wrong.
Yes.
For example, if you have a rule, we don't throw the ball in the house. We can play in the yard, but not in the house.
Yeah.
But if you throw the ball in the house, you lose privileges. The ball has to go in the trunk of the car for 2 days, and you don't get to play with it.
Yeah.
And if you break something, we'll have to take it out of your allowance and pay for it.
Yeah.
Okay, so the child throws the ball in the house and breaks a vase. You don't have to yell and scream at them. I told you not to do that.
Yeah.
No, you just say, Johnny, I'm so proud of you. You normally keep the rules. But this time you broke the rule. And you threw the ball in the house and you broke the vase. Now you know what has to happen, right? He starts crying and nodding his head. So let's go put the ball in the trunk of the car. And now I don't know what the vase will cost. We'll have to find out. We'll have to start taking it out of your allowance. But I'm proud of you because you normally obey the rules. See, you're loving them while you're letting them suffer the consequences.
Oh, you're helping me so much.
And we all learn by suffering consequences. I remember a father said to me, he said, my son was picked up for driving under the influence and he's in jail and I'm going to go down there and get him out. I said, you want my advice? Let him stay there tonight.
Yep.
Maybe let him stay there a night or two. Then you can decide what you're going to do. Let him get the feel for the consequences of doing wrong.
Yeah. That is true because I know my parents, they said, you made your bed, lay in it. That was an old saying, you made your bed, lay in it.
Yep.
I was like, but it taught me something at a very early age. Taught me something at a very early age. And about the whole jail situation, I remember my friend was shoplifting and he was going to steal this recorder from Sears. That's when Sears was around. He said to steal a recorder because he said his mom's boyfriend was abusing him. So we were going to go ahead and be detective. We was going to get this recorder, and we got caught, and we got put in jail for a night. And when I called my dad, he was like, "Stay there." I said, hold on, you gotta come get me. Like, I called you for a reason. I called you to come get me. He was like, no, stay there. And I was like, can you put mom on the phone? I said, Mom, the dad said he's gonna stay there. I said, until when?
Yeah.
And I spent the night in that jail.
Oh yeah.
And but then I look at a lot of ways that I parent, even though I say tough boy stuff and be like, I'm gonna make you suffer the consequences. Then I overexert myself with grace and be like, all right, now next time I'm gonna make you do this. And it'd be a whole lot of next time. And then next time, then I find out I just enabled my child.
Yep, absolutely. I used to go down once a month on Saturday night to the juvenile detention center.
Me too, every Sunday.
And play ping pong and talk with the kids and all. When my son got to be a teenager, I started taking him with me.
Good.
And we'd go down and play, and talk to the kids. And driving home, I'd say, Derek, think about it, son. Those kids are your age, and they're in there because they broke the law.
Yeah.
And, that's training. You're letting them see the results, of doing wrong.
Are you tough like that, though? If your son did something against the law, would you try to cover him and get him out of jail or whatnot?
I think the natural tendency is to do that.
Yeah.
But I think if we realize, unless we want them to do it again, we need to let them suffer the consequences of what they've done. They're far more likely not to do it again if they suffer the consequences.
Right. Right.
If we remove the consequences, why should they be concerned? Dad'll bail me out, And so they go through a whole lifetime not obeying laws.
That's good. You have a premium quiz that people can take for the 5 love languages. Why is the premium quiz more important than the free one?
Well, it gives you a lot more information about yourself. For example, in that quiz, not only do you learn your love language, your primary love language, but you also learn which of the dialects within that language, because every language has dialects.
Right.
So you learn which of the dialects within that language are most important to you. And it also shares with you your personality traits and how your personality interfaces with your love languages. There's just a whole lot of materials. Actually, it's a 15-page write-out that you get. That's
15 pages?
15 pages. That's individualized to you. Now, you don't take that. The quiz only takes you about 20 minutes to take.
Okay.
But you're going to get all this information about yourself that's going to help you understand who you are.
I love it.
As well as understand your love language. And then it'll give you a sheet that you can share with your parents or your friends or anybody, for that matter, of you, who you are. So if you want to help me, keep this in mind. Imagine if you had that information on your spouse or on your teenage child or anybody, for that matter. Wow. It would give you information on how best to help them. But first of all, it helps you understand yourself. So yeah, we haven't had this premium quiz very long. They told me the other week, 147,000 people have taken the free quiz. And I told them, I said, you should have been charging $1 a piece.
For real? 147,000.
But the premier quiz, there is a charge for the premier quiz, but it's really
nominal.
Worth it. Really worth it.
It's like $39 or something, whatever it is, nominal. But I'm gonna talk to Janice and get like a promo code and give it to our subscribers, because I want all of y'all to take this quiz. First of all, just to be a blessing to Dr. Chapman for taking the time to even come on the Yellow Couch and share these gems. I hope y'all found a lot of value in this. There's going to be a link in the description that will take you straight to the quiz for you to take it. Make sure that you purchase the 5 love languages. It also has an accompanying workbook. Get the workbook. What I love about the Dear Future Wifey podcast is that our subscribers, first of all, they totally support my guests, and we're people who want to learn and do better in relationships. We're growing together. We're all on this journey together where we become healthy individuals so that we can have healthy marriages, healthy families, be healthy employees and healthy bosses in the workplace. And so I just thank you for taking the time to drop these gems on us. Thank you for giving me an inside look into your life. And I think you represented Carolyn well.
Good.
You did a good job. I think she'll be proud of you. But thank you so much. Hey, y'all give it up for my homie, Dr. Gary Chapman. Stay tuned to the end for a letter to my future wifey.
Been writing these love letters to you.
Ladarian thrusted suddenly into Child Protective Services in 2015. My nephew, Black, a boy. The likelihood of being adopted outside of kinship, slim to none. Armani, 16 years old, Black, a boy, with 5 years in the foster care system before I even knew his name. The likelihood of ever being adopted, yep, you guessed it, slim to none. While Ladarian and Armani were trying to survive and barely thrive in an overpopulated and underfunded foster care system, I was living my own life, doing well professionally. Having been a single father with a daughter who at that point was doing well in college, it was my time to live my life, right? Wrong. I felt unsettled, tireless, agitated. There are just too many of our Black children stuck in ambiguity and in the limbo of the foster care system. In 2017, I legally adopted my nephew, Ladarian. Fast forward to 2019, I had no ties to this other young king, but I felt God instructed me to adopt him also, and I obeyed. Starting over with parenting should have been enough, right? Working with various foster care and adoption agencies to help bring awareness to the countless young Black kings in the foster care system should have decreased my agitation, right? Joining the board of directors of Advantage Adoption, an organization that helps find permanent adoptive homes for children in foster care, should have led to some type of resolve, right? No, not at all. None of it felt like I had done enough. I now realize that every one of those experiences was laying the fundamental foundation for my life's mission, Kingdom Royale. Kingdom Royale will be a luxury, state-of-the-art home for foster boys. Our first location will be in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. We will utilize the whole person approach that instills identity, empowers them to advocate for themselves, and enlightens them regarding new perspectives and limitless options that they thought were impossible. Though the young kings will attend the local public schools that are in proximity to Kingdom Royale, our at-home curriculum will broaden their worldview through participating in the arts, attending various cultural events, learning about and engaging in multifaceted discussions about current events and even relevant historical context, introducing them to gardening and landscaping and even caring for our animals on our farm and on-site stables. We just launched our Startup Capital campaign with the goal of raising $2.8 million. Now, why $2.8 million? Well, in 2017, I created a web series in which I performed random acts of kindness for targeting the homeless community. One of the most notable successes was that one of the videos went viral, garnering 28 million views. However, one of my biggest regrets is that I didn't raise a single dollar to help in implementing a more sustainable plan for the homeless community. So throughout the years, with much remorse, I reflected on not maximizing that moment. I knew if at that time, just 10% of the viewers donated $1, we would have raised at least $2.8 million that could have really established long-term support for the homeless community, or at least started a long-term initiative to do so. This is my do-over. This is our new beginning. Together, we can attack this at the root by specifically helping our homeless Black boys who are already disproportionately represented in the American foster care system. I'm Laterras R. Whitfield. I've been nominated for 3 regional Emmys documenting my work with the homeless as well as my personal adoption journey. Despite those accolades, the greatest award for me is truly providing the infrastructure for a transformed life. Visit kingdomroyale.com for more details. Crown a king and make a donation today. That was fun. I enjoyed talking to Dr. Gary Chapman on the Dear Future Wifey podcast. That meant so much to me to be able to unpack the 5 love languages, a book that has been so instrumental in my life, in my previous marriage, and how I see love, how I show up in love, and how I want to give love and receive love. This was powerful. Well, here's my favorite part of the podcast where I speak to my future wifey. Dear future wifey, your love language is the key to your heart, the way you feel most cherished and understood, whether it's through words of affirmation, acts of service, receiving gifts, quality time, or physical touch. I want to speak that language fluently. I want to know the small gestures that make you feel loved and secure, the things that bring a smile to your face, even on the hardest days. In return, I hope you'll take the time to learn my love language. Together, we can create a rhythm of love that flows naturally between us, a dance where we both know the steps and move in harmony. When we're in sync, I believe we'll be able to navigate the ups and downs of life with a deeper connection, understanding each other in ways that words alone can't express. Love languages are a beautiful reminder that love is active, something we must continually nurture and cultivate. By learning each other's languages, we're not just saying, I love you. We're showing it in a way that resonates deeply within us both. Here's to a love that speaks volumes in every language we share. Your future hubby. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Dear Future Wifey Podcast. Remember, be lit, live intentionally and transparently, and don't stop loving. Make sure to subscribe to our Dear Future Wifey YouTube channel. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. We welcome your support. Simply share our podcast with your friends and family.